The hum of the airplane engines filled the cabin as 15-year-old Andre settled into his window seat. Flight AA-1372 had just taken off from Atlanta, where he'd spent the last week with his grandmother. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, watching the city shrink beneath him until it disappeared into a patchwork of tiny squares and winding roads. Andre took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He wasn't scared of flying, not exactly. But something about being trapped in a metal tube thousands of feet in the air always made his stomach knot up a little. To distract himself, he pulled out the medical textbook his uncle had given him for his birthday. Ever since he was little, Andre had dreamed of becoming a doctor. Last year, he'd joined his high school's health sciences program, where he'd learned basic first aid and CPR. "That's some heavy reading for someone your age," said the elderly woman sitting next to him, nodding at his book with a kind smile. Andre grinned. "I want to be a doctor someday. My mom says I might as well start learning now." As they chatted, Andre couldn't help noticing a middle-aged man in a plain navy suit sitting across the aisle. There was nothing particularly remarkable about him, but Andre had always been observant. The man sat very straight, his eyes constantly scanning the cabin in a way that seemed practiced rather than nervous. Every now and then, he'd adjust his jacket, which seemed to hang a bit heavily on one side. About 30 minutes into the flight, Andre was deep into a chapter about cardiac emergencies when a commotion caught his attention. The man in the navy suit was hunched forward in his seat, one hand clutching his chest, his face twisted in pain. "Sir, are you okay?" asked a young woman sitting beside him. The man tried to respond but could only manage a strangled gasp. Then, as if in slow motion, he slumped forward and collapsed into the aisle. The cabin erupted in startled cries. A flight attendant rushed over, kneeling beside the fallen man. "Is there a doctor on board?" she called out, her voice steady but urgent. Andre watched as passengers looked around anxiously, but no one stepped forward. The flight attendant repeated her call, desperation creeping into her voice. Without thinking, Andre unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. "I'm not a doctor," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "But I know first aid. I've been trained." The flight attendant looked up, relief and doubt battling in her expression as she took in the teenager standing before her. For a moment, Andre thought she would dismiss him, but then the man on the floor let out another pained gasp, and her uncertainty vanished. "Come here," she said, gesturing him over. Andre squeezed past the elderly woman and hurried to the aisle. His heart pounded in his chest and he could feel sweat beading on his forehead. This wasn't like practice at school. This was real. As he knelt beside the man, the flight attendant leaned close to Andre's ear. "He's an air marshal," she whispered. "He's armed. We need to be careful." Andre's eyes widened. He'd heard about air marshals, federal officers who traveled on flights to prevent terrorist attacks, but he'd never expected to meet one, much less in these circumstances. The air marshal's face was ashen, his breathing shallow and labored. Andre placed 2 fingers against the side of his neck, feeling for a pulse like he'd been taught. It was there, but rapid and irregular. "Sir, can you hear me?" Andre asked, speaking clearly and loudly. The air marshal's eyelids fluttered, and he mumbled something unintelligible. "I need the emergency medical kit," Andre said to the flight attendant, trying to sound more confident than he felt. She nodded and hurried toward the front of the plane. Around them, passengers craned their necks to see what was happening. Some had their phones out, recording the scene. Andre ignored them, focusing entirely on the man before him. "Can someone help me move him to a flatter area?" Andre asked. 2 men from nearby seats immediately stood up and, following Andre's careful instructions, helped position the air marshal more comfortably in the wider space near the emergency exit row. The flight attendant returned with a red medical kit which she handed to Andre. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, but he forced himself to remember his training. "Check airways, breathing, circulation," his instructor's voice echoed in his head. The air marshal's breathing was becoming more labored, sweat poured down his face, and his lips had taken on a bluish tint. Andre recognized the signs of a serious medical emergency, possibly a heart attack or severe allergic reaction. Does anyone know if he has any medical conditions? Andre called out. Did anyone see him take medication or eat anything? A businessman a few rows back raised his hand. I saw him take some pills from his pocket earlier, small white ones. Andre carefully checked the air marshal's pockets, mindful of the weapon the flight attendant had mentioned. In an inner jacket pocket, he found a small case containing an epinephrine auto-injector, the kind used for severe allergic reactions. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a medical situation on board. If there are any medical professionals who haven't already identified themselves, please press your call button immediately. No buttons lit up. Andre looked at the air marshal's face. His eyes were now closed, his breathing becoming more strained by the second. Making a decision, Andre held up the auto-injector. I think he's having a severe allergic reaction, he said to the flight attendant. This is an epinephrine injector. It could help him, but I need to know if I should use it. The flight attendant spoke rapidly into her radio, presumably consulting with medical professionals on the ground. After a tense moment, she nodded. They say if that's his prescription and he's showing signs of anaphylaxis, we should administer it. Andre had never used a real epinephrine injector before, only training models in health class. But lives could depend on doing this right. He removed the safety cap, positioned the injector against the air marshal's outer thigh, and pressed firmly until he heard a click. For several agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Passengers watched in tense silence. The only sounds were the hum of the engines and the air marshal's labored breathing. Then gradually, the air marshal's breathing became less strained. His eyes fluttered open, confusion evident in his gaze as he took in the circle of concerned faces above him. You're on a plane, Andre explained gently. You had what looks like an allergic reaction. I gave you your epinephrine. An ambulance will meet us when we land. Relief washed over the cabin. Nearby passengers exchanged glances and smiles. An older man patted Andre on the shoulder, and someone a few rows back started a round of applause that quickly spread throughout the cabin. The air marshal tried to sit up, but Andre placed a firm hand on his shoulder. It's better if you stay still until the paramedics can check you, he said, surprising himself with his confidence. The epinephrine will help for now, but the reaction could come back. We need to keep an eye on you. The flight attendant brought a bottle of water and a cool cloth for the air marshal's forehead. As color slowly returned to his face, he looked at Andre with an expression of profound gratitude. Thank you, he whispered, his voice raspy. I don't know what happened. I've never had a reaction like that before. Did you eat something new today? Andre asked. Or maybe come into contact with something you're allergic to? The air marshal furrowed his brow. The only unusual thing was, I tried a new brand of peanuts at the airport lounge. Andre nodded. That could be it. Sometimes allergies can develop suddenly, even to foods you've eaten before. As the immediate danger passed, Andre became aware of the many eyes watching him. Heat rose to his cheeks. He'd been so focused on helping that he hadn't registered becoming the center of attention. The flight attendant squeezed his shoulder. You did good, kid, she said warmly. Really good. We'll have about 2 hours before landing. I'll stay with him, but could you check back every 15 minutes or so? Andre nodded, suddenly feeling drained as the adrenaline began to wear off. As he made his way back to his seat, passengers reached out to shake his hand or pat his back. The elderly woman next to his seat was beaming with pride as if he were her own grandson. That was something special, she told him as he buckled back in. You kept your cool when everyone else was panicking. That's rare, especially for someone so young. Andre smiled shyly. I just did what anyone would do. No, she said firmly. Not everyone would have stepped up like that. You should be proud. As the flight continued, Andre kept his promise to check on the air marshal regularly. Each time the man seemed a little stronger, a little more like himself. They didn't talk much. The air marshal still needed to rest, but there was a connection between them now forged in those critical moments. Andre took out his phone and sent a quick text to his mother, telling her about what had happened. He knew she'd be worried, but also proud. His dream of becoming a doctor had always been abstract. something for the distant future. Today, for the first time, he'd gotten a taste of what it meant to hold someone's life in his hands. Looking out the window at the endless blue sky, Andre felt something shift inside him. The future suddenly seemed more real, more possible. He'd faced an emergency and hadn't frozen. He'd helped someone when it mattered most. Little did he know that the real test was still to come. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Andre found himself moving between his seat and the Air Marshal's Mac. E-shift recovery area, checking vital signs and making sure the man remained stable. Each time he knelt beside the federal officer, Andre's hands grew steadier, his voice more confident. "How are you feeling now, sir?" Andre asked during one of these check-ins, noting with relief that the man's color continued to improve. The Air Marshal, who had introduced himself simply as Officer Thomas, managed a weak smile. "Better. Still a bit shaky, but I can breathe again." He studied Andre's face with curious eyes. "Where did you learn all this? You can't be more than what, 16? 15? Andre corrected, a hint of pride in his voice. "I'm in a health sciences program at school. I want to be a doctor someday." Officer Thomas nodded appreciatively. "Well, you've got a good start. Not many grown men would have stepped up like you did." A flight attendant approached with a clipboard. "The captain needs some information for the medical team that will meet us at the gate," she explained. "Do you know what might have triggered your reaction, sir?" While Officer Thomas answered questions about his medical history, Andre returned to his seat, suddenly aware of how tired he felt. The elderly woman beside him, who had told him to call her Ms. Rose, patted his hand. "You should try to rest a bit," she suggested. "You've had quite an adventure." Andre nodded gratefully and leaned his head back, closing his eyes. But rest wouldn't come. His mind kept replaying the events of the past hour, analyzing his actions, wondering if he could have done things differently, better. It was a habit his mother always teased him about, this tendency to overthink everything. "Always living in that big brain of yours," she'd say with a fond smile. His thoughts were interrupted when the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Wilson speaking. I want to update you on our situation. Thanks to the quick action of one of our young passengers, our medical emergency has stabilized. However, as a precaution, we've been granted priority landing at Dallas, Fort Worth International. We should be on the ground in approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes. Flight attendants will be coming through the cabin shortly with complimentary refreshments. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened when possible, as we may encounter some turbulence ahead." A quiet murmur of conversation rippled through the cabin. Several passengers glanced back at Andre with looks of admiration, making him shrink a little in his seat. He'd never been comfortable being the center of attention. "Looks like you're the hero of Flight 1372, Ms. Rose said with a wink. "I'm not a hero," Andre protested quietly. "I just happen to know what to do." "Knowing what to do when everyone else is panicking, that's exactly what makes a hero," she replied firmly. Before Andre could respond, a different flight attendant stopped at their row with a cart. "Anything to drink?" she asked, her smile extra warm as she looked at Andre. "It's on the house today." Andre asked for an apple juice and Ms. Rose requested hot tea. As the flight attendant prepared their drinks, she leaned down and spoke softly to Andre. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "Officer Thomas is a regular on this route. He's protected us on dozens of flights. It means a lot to our crew that you helped him." Andre nodded, unsure how to respond to such earnest gratitude. The flight attendant straightened up, handed them their drinks, and continued down the aisle. Sipping his juice, Andre glanced across the aisle to where Officer Thomas now sat in a regular seat, though with plenty of space around him. A flight attendant remained nearby, monitoring his condition. Their eyes met briefly and the Air Marshal gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. "You know," Ms. Rose said thoughtfully, "when I was about your age, I wanted to be a nurse. Never quite made it. Life had other plans. But I've always admired those who go into medicine. It takes a special kind of person." "What did you end up doing instead?" Andre asked, genuinely curious. "I taught high school chemistry for 42 years, she replied with a smile. Not quite medicine, but I like to think I inspired a few future doctors along the way. Their conversation flowed easily after that. Ms. Rose told stories about her teaching days, and Andre shared his dreams of medical school. The time passed quickly, and before long the captain announced they were beginning their descent into Dallas. As the plane tilted downward, a flight attendant approached Andre's seat. "Officer Thomas would like to speak with you if you don't mind," she said. With a quick glance at Ms. Rose, who gave him an encouraging nod, Andre unbuckled his seatbelt and followed the flight attendant to where Officer Thomas sat. The air marshal looked much better now, still pale but alert and breathing normally. He gestured for Andre to take the empty seat beside him. "I wanted to thank you properly," Officer Thomas said, his voice stronger than before. "The crew told me you're the reason I'm still breathing." Andre felt his cheeks warm. "I just did what I was trained to do, sir." "Well, that training saved my life." The air marshal paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "I've been doing this job for 15 years. Never once had a medical emergency. Never even considered the possibility, to be honest. I carry that epinephrine injector because I had a mild shellfish allergy as a kid, but it never gave me trouble as an adult." Andre nodded. "Allergies can change over time. Sometimes they get better, but sometimes they get worse or develop suddenly. So I've learned," Officer Thomas said ruefully. "The doctor I spoke to over the satellite phone thinks it might have been cross-contamination. The lounge I ate in before boarding serves a seafood salad that's quite popular." They fell silent. As the plane hit a patch of turbulence, Officer Thomas gripped the armrest tightly, his knuckles white. Andre noticed a thin sheen of sweat on the man's forehead. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked, concerned. Officer Thomas nodded. "Just a bit dizzy when the plane moves like that. The doctor said it might be a side effect of the epinephrine, that and the racing heart." "That's normal," Andre assured him. "Epinephrine is basically adrenaline. It makes your heart beat faster and can make you feel shaky or dizzy. It should wear off soon." The air marshal studied him with newfound respect. "You really do know your stuff, don't you?" Andre shrugged. "I read a lot, and my health science teacher is really good. She makes sure we understand the why behind everything we learn." As they continued their descent, Officer Thomas asked Andre about his school, his family, his plans for the future. There was a genuine interest in his questions, and Andre found himself opening up more than he usually would with a stranger. "My dad was a paramedic," Andre explained. "He passed away when I was 9, but I remember how people in our neighborhood used to stop him on the street to thank him for helping them. I guess that stuck with me." "He'd be proud of you today, officer," Thomas said quietly. The plane descended through the clouds and the sprawling expanse of Dallas came into view. The captain's voice announced they were on final approach and instructed the flight attendants to prepare for landing. "I should get back to my seat," Andre said, starting to rise. Officer Thomas reached out and briefly clasped his shoulder. "Thank you again, I mean it." Andre nodded and made his way back to his seat beside Ms. Rose, who had been watching their interaction with interest. "Everything all right?" she asked as he buckled in. "Yeah," Andre replied, a small smile playing on his lips. "He's going to be okay." The plane touched down smoothly, and the passengers broke into spontaneous applause. Partly for the pilot's landing, but Andre suspected it was also relief that their unexpected medical drama had ended well. As they taxied to the gate, the captain made one final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been informed that paramedics are standing by to assist our passenger. To expedite their access, we ask that you remain seated until they've boarded and completed their assessment. Thank you for your patience and understanding during this unusual flight." True to the captain's word, the moment the aircraft door opened, 2 paramedics in bright uniforms boarded, carrying medical equipment. The passengers watched silently as they made their way to Officer Thomas, speaking to him in low, professional tones as they checked his vital signs. Andre couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see the air marshal pointing in his direction several times as he spoke to the paramedics. One of them, a tall woman with a neat braid, looked over at Andre with an expression of surprise and approval. After about 10 minutes of examination, the paramedics helped Officer Thomas to his feet. He would be taken to a hospital for further observation, standard procedure after a severe allergic reaction, as Andre knew from his training. As they guided him toward the exit, Officer Thomas paused in the aisle near Andre's seat. "Looks like I'm in good hands now," he said. "Thanks to you getting me this far." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, which he handed to Andre. "If you ever need anything, recommendation letters for college, someone to talk to about medicine, whatever, you call me. I mean it." Andre accepted the card, tucked it carefully into his wallet, and thanked the officer. As the paramedics escorted Officer Thomas off the plane, the other passengers finally began gathering their belongings and preparing to deplane. Ms. Rose gave Andre a knowing smile. "Now that's a connection that might come in handy someday." Andre nodded, still processing everything that had happened. Just a few hours ago, he'd been a regular teenager on a regular flight home from visiting his grandmother. Now he'd saved someone's life, made a connection with a federal officer, and gotten a small taste of what his future in medicine might hold. "You know what's strange?" he said to Ms. Rose as they waited for their turn to exit. "I was so nervous about flying this morning. Now that seems silly compared to everything else that happened." "Life's funny that way," she replied. "Often the things we worry about aren't the things that end up mattering." As they shuffled toward the exit, Andre's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Just heard from the airline about what happened. So proud of you. Waiting for you at baggage claim with the biggest hug ever." Andre smiled at the message, picturing his mother's excited face. She'd been his biggest supporter since he first announced his dream of becoming a doctor at the age of 7. Today, he'd taken a real step toward making that dream come true. The line of deplaning passengers moved slowly forward. Through the aircraft windows, Andre could see the busy terminal, people rushing to and from gates, airport staff directing traffic on the tarmac. Ordinary scenes from an ordinary day, except that for him, nothing felt ordinary anymore. As he stepped off the plane, the flight attendants lined up near the door gave him appreciative nods and thank yous. The pilot himself stood there as well, shaking Andre's hand firmly. "Well done, young man," the captain said. "Not many adults would have handled that situation with the calm you showed." "Thank you, sir," Andre replied, feeling a strange mix of pride and embarrassment at all the attention. Walking through the jet bridge toward the terminal, Andre felt lighter somehow, as if something fundamental had shifted inside him. The doubt that had occasionally crept in when he thought about his medical ambitions. Whispers of, "Maybe it's too hard," or "Maybe you're not cut out for it," had fallen silent. In their place was a new certainty, a knowledge deep in his bones that this was exactly what he was meant to do. Little did he know that his journey had only just begun, and that the true test of his character was waiting for him just beyond the terminal doors. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted dramatically once Officer Thomas had stabilized. What had been a scene of tense urgency just minutes before now buzzed with relieved chatter and occasional glances toward the young boy who had stepped up when no one else could. As Andre settled back into his seat, he felt the weight of what had just happened begin to sink in. His hands, steady during the emergency, now trembled slightly as he reached for his water bottle. He took a long sip, trying to process everything. "You all right, honey?" Ms. Rose asked, her weathered hand patting his arm gently. Andre nodded, managing a small smile. "Yeah, just, coming down from the adrenaline, I guess." "That's normal," she assured him. "Your body was in fight mode. Now it's trying to find its balance again." Across the aisle, Officer Thomas rested with his eyes closed, color gradually returning to his face. A flight attendant sat nearby, keeping a watchful eye on his condition. Every few minutes she would check his pulse or offer him water, treating him with the careful attention of someone monitoring a valuable asset. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been informed that we've been granted priority landing status at Dallas-Fort Worth. We should be on the ground in approximately 90 minutes. Medical personnel will meet us at the gate. Until then, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened when possible." A murmur of approval rippled through the cabin. Priority landing meant less time in the air, which was good news for everyone, especially Officer Thomas. Seems you've earned us all an early arrival, Ms. Rose said with a wink. Andre shrugged, uncomfortable with taking credit. It's for him, not me. Still, she insisted. If you hadn't been here. She let the sentence hang unfinished, but Andre understood. If he hadn't been on this particular flight, if he hadn't volunteered his limited knowledge, if he hadn't found the epinephrine injector in time, the outcome could have been very different. A flight attendant appeared at their row, her face warm with genuine appreciation. Can I get either of you anything? A snack, perhaps, or something to drink? Apple juice would be nice, Andre replied. Tea for me, dear. With honey if you have it, added Ms. Rose. Coming right up. And... The flight attendant lowered her voice, leaning in slightly. The crew wanted me to extend our personal thanks. Officer Thomas flies with us regularly. He's protected us on countless flights. What you did today means a lot to all of us. As she moved away to fetch their drinks, Andre felt a flush of warmth that had nothing to do with the cabin temperature. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, or gratitude. At school he was known as the quiet kid who always had his nose in a book, particularly anything related to medicine or science. His classmates respected his intelligence but rarely sought him out. Now, strangers were treating him like some kind of hero. Don't get shy on me now, Ms. Rose teased, noticing his discomfort. You earned every bit of this recognition. I guess I'm just not used to it, he admitted. Well, get used to it, she replied firmly. If you're going into medicine, this won't be the last time you help someone in need. The flight attendant returned with their drinks, along with a small package of cookies for each of them. Compliments of the crew, she explained with a smile. As Andre sipped his juice, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Pulling it out, he saw a text from his mother. Just got a call from the airline about what happened. Are you okay? So proud of you. Text me back when you can. Andre smiled and quickly typed a response. I'm fine, Mom. We'll tell you everything when I land. Should be there sooner than planned. He added a heart emoji before sending the message, knowing it would reassure her. His mother had always been his biggest supporter, working 2 jobs to ensure he could participate in the health sciences program and attend the summer medical camps that fueled his passion. She'd be waiting at the airport, no doubt bursting with questions and pride. As he put his phone away, Andre noticed several passengers from nearby rows glancing his way, some with open curiosity, others with undisguised admiration. A young girl, perhaps 7 or 8, whispered something to her mother while pointing in his direction. The mother smiled and nodded in response. You're a celebrity now, Ms. Rose observed, following his gaze. Andre shook his head, embarrassed. I don't want to be. I just did what anyone with my training would do. But that's just it, isn't it? She countered. Not everyone has your training. Not everyone would have stepped forward. That's worth recognizing. Before Andre could respond, there was movement across the aisle. Officer Thomas was sitting up straighter now, looking more alert. His eyes found Andre's, and he gave a small nod of acknowledgement. It was a simple gesture but loaded with meaning, gratitude, respect, a connection forged in crisis. The flight attendant monitoring him leaned over and said something. Officer Thomas nodded and carefully stood up, steadying himself against the seat. With the attendant's support, he made his way across the aisle to where Andre sat. Mind if I join you for a minute? He asked, his voice stronger than before. Andre nodded, suddenly nervous again. The air marshal lowered himself into the empty aisle seat next to Andre. Up close, Andre could see that his color had improved significantly, though he still moved with the careful deliberation of someone not fully recovered. I wanted to thank you properly, Officer Thomas began. The crew filled me in on what happened when I was out of it. You kept your cool in a situation that would have rattled most adults. I was scared, Andre admitted. I just tried to remember my training. That's what makes a good first responder, Officer Thomas said with a knowing smile. Not the absence of fear, but the ability to function despite it. Ms. Rose leaned forward to introduce herself, and the 3 of them fell into conversation. Officer Thomas explained that he'd been an air marshal for 11 years, flying undercover on domestic and international flights to ensure passenger safety. Never thought I'd be the one needing saving, he said with a rueful shake of his head. Especially not from shellfish of all things. I've eaten shrimp my whole life without issues. Allergies can develop suddenly, Andre explained, slipping, naturally, into the information he'd learned in his health classes. Sometimes your body can tolerate something for years and then, one day, the immune system just changes its mind. Officer Thomas listened attentively, impressed by the teenager's knowledge. So this could happen again? Possibly, Andre nodded. Once you've had a severe reaction, you're at higher risk for future ones. They might be even more severe too. You should probably see an allergist when we land, get tested to figure out exactly what triggered it. Planning on it, Officer Thomas assured him. The captain arranged for an ambulance to meet us at the gate. Their conversation continued, moving from allergies to Andre's interest in medicine to Officer Thomas's experiences as an air marshal, the parts he could share at least. Ms. Rose chimed in with stories from her years as a chemistry teacher, including a few spectacular lab accidents that had everyone laughing. Time passed quickly in this easy exchange. Other passengers occasionally glanced their way, curious about the teenager deep in conversation with the federal officer whose life he'd saved. About an hour into their flight, the captain announced they were starting their initial descent into Dallas. Offie. Sir Thomas thanked Andre once more and returned to his seat for landing, moving with more confidence than before. As he settled back in, Andre felt something he hadn't experienced before, a certainty about his path forward. He'd always known he wanted to be a doctor, but it had been an abstract goal, something for the distant future. Now, having faced a real medical emergency and made a difference, that future felt tangible, within reach. You're smiling, Ms. Rose observed. Just thinking, Andre replied. Today made everything seem more real somehow. She nodded knowingly. Nothing solidifies a dream like putting it into practice. The plane descended through clouds, revealing the sprawling landscape of Dallas below. Andre watched through the window as the city grew larger, streets and buildings coming into focus. Somewhere down there, his mother would be heading to the airport, probably driving a little too fast in her excitement to see him. The landing gear deployed with a mechanical thunk that vibrated through the cabin. Andre gripped the armrests instinctively as the plane tilted downward for its final approach. Not a fan of landings? Ms. Rose asked, noticing his white knuckles. They always make me nervous, he admitted. Takeoffs too. After what you handled today, a little landing should be nothing, she teased gently. Andre smiled, appreciating her attempt to distract him. As the ground rushed up to meet them, he closed his eyes briefly, then opened them to see the runway appear beneath the plane. The touchdown was smooth, eliciting the customary round of applause from relieved passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dallas Fort Worth International Airport, the captain announced. Local time is 3:42 p.m., and the temperature is a pleasant 78 degrees. We've been instructed to taxi directly to gate D23, where medical personnel are standing by. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we reach the gate. As the plane taxied toward the terminal, Andre's phone buzzed again. Another text from his mom. At the airport now. Airline told me about the early arrival. Can't wait to hear the whole story. So proud I could burst. Andre smiled at her enthusiasm, though a flicker of nervousness passed through him. His mother tended to make a big deal out of his accomplishments, sometimes embarrassingly so. He could already imagine her recounting the story to everyone they knew, probably with dramatic embellishments. Family waiting for you? Ms. Rose asked, noticing his expression. My mom, he confirmed. She's excitable. Ms. Rose chuckled. She has every right to be proud today. The plane pulled up to the gate, and the seatbelt sign dinged off. Unlike the usual rush to stand and retrieve overhead bags, the passengers remained seated, respecting the captain's earlier request to allow medical personnel to board first. Within minutes, the aircraft door opened, and two paramedics in uniform entered carrying equipment. They moved directly to Officer Thomas, speaking with him briefly before beginning their assessment. The air marshal pointed toward Andre several times during their conversation, and one of the paramedics looked over with an expression of surprise and respect. After checking his vital signs and asking several questions, the paramedics helped Officer Thomas to his feet. As they prepared to escort him off the plane, he paused near Andre's row. "They want to take me to the hospital for observation," he explained. "Standard procedure, apparently." "It's a good idea," Andre agreed. "Anaphylactic reactions can sometimes have a second phase, hours after the initial one." Officer Thomas smiled at this additional evidence of the teenager's knowledge. Reaching into his pocket, he extracted a business card and handed it to Andre. "I meant what I said earlier. If you ever need anything, advice, recommendations for medical school, whatever, you call me. What you did today won't be forgotten." Andre accepted the card with a nod of thanks, tucking it carefully into his wallet. As the paramedics guided Officer Thomas toward the exit, passengers began to stir, gathering their belongings and preparing to deplane. "That could be a valuable connection," Ms. Rose observed. "Federal officers know people in high places." Andre hadn't thought of it that way. He'd helped Officer Thomas because it was the right thing to do, not because he expected anything in return. Still, having a contact in federal law enforcement couldn't hurt, especially when application season for medical school eventually rolled around. As they waited for their turn to exit, Andre's thoughts drifted to the story he would tell his mother. She would want every detail, every word exchanged. And knowing her, she'd insist on calling his grandmother immediately to share the news, which meant the entire extended family would know by dinner time. The line of deplaning passengers moved slowly forward. Through the windows, Andre could see the busy terminal beyond, people rushing to and from gates, airport staff directing traffic on the tarmac. It all seemed so normal, so everyday, yet for him, nothing felt normal anymore. When they finally reached the front of the plane, the entire flight crew was lined up to say goodbye. The captain himself stood there, extending his hand to Andre. "Well done today, son," he said, his grip firm and warm. "You've got a bright future ahead of you." "Thank you, sir," Andre replied, both embarrassed and pleased by the recognition. Ms. Rose gave him a quick hug before they parted ways in the terminal. "Remember what I said about being proud of yourself," she instructed. "You earned it." Andre promised he would, and headed toward baggage claim, where his mother would be waiting. As he walked through the busy terminal, he felt different somehow. Taller, more confident, more certain of his place in the world. Little did he know that his journey had only just begun, and that the true test was waiting for him just beyond, the security checkpoint. Andre made his way through the bustling terminal, still riding the emotional high of the past few hours. Passengers from his flight nodded or smiled as they passed him, a few even stopping to pat his shoulder or offer a quick, "Good job, kid." Each acknowledgement made his chest swell with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. He'd never been the center of attention before, and the feeling was both exhilarating and uncomfortable. As he approached the security exit, Andre spotted his mother in the waiting area, scanning the crowd anxiously. At 15, he was tall for his age, almost 6 feet, but his mother could always pick him out of any crowd. The moment their eyes met, her worried expression melted into a beaming smile. "Andre," she called, waving frantically as if he might somehow miss her. He quickened his pace, suddenly eager to share everything with her. His mother had always been his biggest supporter, working long hours as a hospital administrator to provide for them after his father passed away. It was her stories about the doctors she worked with that had first sparked his interest in medicine. "Mom," he started as he reached her, but the rest of his words were smothered in her tight embrace. "The airline called me," she said, finally releasing him enough to look at his face. "They told me what happened on the plane. My baby saved someone's life." Andre felt his cheeks warm. "It wasn't that dramatic, Mom. I just knew what to do, that's all." "Don't you downplay this," she insisted, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Do you know how proud your father would be? How proud I am?" Before Andre could respond, a commotion near the security checkpoint caught their attention. 2 airport police officers were making their way through the crowd, their expressions serious, and focused. Something about their purposeful stride made Andre's stomach tighten instinctively. "What's going on?" his mother wondered aloud, following his gaze. The officers moved directly toward them, parting the flow of travelers like stones in a stream. When they stopped just a few feet away, Andre knew with a sinking certainty that they were looking for him. "Andre Wilson?" the taller officer asked, his voice clipped and official. Andre nodded, confusion washing over him. "Yes, sir?" The officer exchanged a brief glance with his partner before continuing. "We need you to come with us, son." "Why?" his mother demanded, stepping partially in front of Andre in a protective gesture that reminded him of when he was much younger. "What's this about?" "Ma'am, we have reason to believe your son was involved in an incident aboard flight AA-1372, the second officer explained, his tone slightly gentler but no less firm. "Incident?" Andre's mother repeated incredulously. "He saved a man's life." "The airline just called to tell me about it." The officers remained stone-faced. "Ma'am, we need to ask him some questions. It's standard procedure." Something wasn't right. Andre could feel it in the sudden tension that had settled over the small group, in the way other travelers were beginning to slow down and stare, in the rigid posture of the officers who stood before them. "I don't understand," Andre said, his voice smaller than he intended. "I just helped Officer Thomas when he had an allergic reaction. The captain and crew thanked me." The first officer's expression hardened slightly at the mention of the air marshal's name. "Turn around, please." "What?" Andre's confusion deepened. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the officer repeated, his hand moving to the handcuffs at his belt. "You can't be serious," Andre's mother protested, her voice rising. "He's 15 years old. He didn't do anything wrong." But the officers weren't listening. The taller one stepped forward, physically turning Andre around while the second one moved to block his mother, who was becoming increasingly agitated. "Andre Wilson, you're being detained for questioning regarding unauthorized access to federal equipment and interference with a federal officer in the performance of his duties," the officer recited mechanically, as cold metal closed around Andre's wrists. The words hit Andre like a physical blow. Handcuffs. They were arresting him for helping someone. None of it made sense, yet it was happening right here in the middle of the airport terminal, with dozens of strangers watching. "This is ridiculous," his mother shouted, trying to push past the second officer. "He's a child. He saved that man's life. You can call the airline, call the captain." Other passengers had stopped to watch the scene unfold. Some had their phones out, recording. Among them, Andre recognized a few faces from his flight, people who had witnessed everything that had happened on the plane. "Hey, that's the kid who helped the air marshal," someone called out. "What are you doing?" "Yeah, he's a hero, not a criminal," another voice added. The officers ignored the growing chorus of protests. The one holding Andre began to guide him toward a side door, away from the main concourse. "Mom!" Andre called back, fear finally breaking through his shock. "Mom, call Ms. Rose. She saw everything." "I'm not leaving you," his mother promised, struggling to follow, despite the second officer's attempts to keep her back. "This is a mistake. I'm calling a lawyer right now." As they moved through the side door into a quieter corridor, Andre's mind raced. What had he done wrong? He'd found the epinephrine injector in Officer Thomas's pocket, yes, but the flight attendant had been right. There, watching him, he'd administered it with permission from both the flight crew and the medical professionals they'd consulted on the ground. Officer Thomas himself had thanked him repeatedly. They walked in tense silence through a series of hallways, eventually arriving at a small, windowless room with a table and 4 chairs. It looked exactly like the interrogation rooms Andre had seen in TV shows, which only increased his anxiety. "Sit down," the taller officer instructed, unlocking one of the handcuffs and securing it to a metal ring attached to the table. Andre complied, too stunned to do anything else. His mother was directed to a chair across from him, while the 2 officers took positions by the door. "Someone will be in shortly to take your statement," the second officer informed them before both men stepped outside, closing the door behind them. The moment they were alone, Andre's mother reached across the table to grasp his free hand. "This is insane," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Andre replied, though a small irrational part of him had begun to wonder if perhaps he had broken some rule he hadn't known about. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding." His mother's eyes flashed. "A misunderstanding doesn't require handcuffs, especially not for a minor." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Jerome. He'll know what to do." Jerome was her cousin, a criminal defense attorney who worked in Dallas. Andre had met him only a few times at family gatherings, but he remembered a sharp-witted man with an easy laugh and a no-nonsense approach to problems. As his mother dialed, Andre tried to make sense of what was happening. The officers had mentioned unauthorized access to federal equipment and interference with a federal officer. Was the epinephrine injector considered federal equipment? And how had he interfered with Officer Thomas? He'd been unconscious, unable to perform any duties. "Jerome, it's Linda," his mother was saying, her voice tight with controlled panic. "They've detained Andre at the airport." "Yes, handcuffed him." "No, he didn't do anything wrong. In fact, he saved someone's life on the plane, an air marshal who had an allergic reaction." While she explained the situation, Andre stared down at the metal cuff around his wrist. Just hours ago, he'd been certain of his future path, proud of having used his knowledge to help someone in need. Now, he sat in what amounted to a jail cell, treated like a criminal for that very same act. His mother ended the call with a terse, "Thank you," and turned her attention back to Andre. "Jerome is on his way. He says not to answer any questions until he gets here." Andre nodded, though the thought of sitting in silence with whoever came through that door next made his stomach churn. "How long will that take?" 20 minutes, maybe 30 with traffic," she replied, glancing at her watch. He was already downtown for another case. They lapsed into an uneasy silence, broken only by the occasional reassurance from his mother that everything would be okay, that this was all a big mistake that would be cleared up soon. Andre wanted to believe her, but the cold metal around his wrist made it difficult. After what felt like an eternity but was probably closer to 15 minutes, the door opened. A woman in a sharp navy suit entered, followed by a younger man in similar attire. Neither wore a uniform, but they carried themselves with the unmistakable authority of federal agents. "I'm Special Agent Carter," the woman introduced herself, her tone brisk but not unkind. "This is Agent Reyes. We'd like to ask you some questions about what happened on flight AA1372 today. My son won't be answering any questions until our attorney arrives," Andre's mother stated firmly. Agent Carter raised an eyebrow but nodded. "That's your right, of course. When do you expect your attorney?" "Within the hour," his mother replied, deliberately vague. "Very well." Agent Carter took a seat across from them, while Agent Reyes remained standing. "While we wait, perhaps I can clarify why you're here, since you seem confused." Andre glanced at his mother, who gave a small nod, indicating it was okay to listen. "Andre," Agent Carter began, fixing him with a direct gaze, "you are being detained because we received a report that you accessed a federal air marshal's weapon during flight, administered an unknown substance to him without proper authorization, and potentially compromised his ability to perform his duties." "What?" Andre and his mother exclaimed simultaneously. "That's not what happened at all," Andre protested. "Officer Thomas collapsed from an allergic reaction. He was unconscious. I found his epinephrine injector in his pocket and used it to help him breathe again. The flight attendants were right there the whole time." Agent Carter's expression remained neutral. "According to the initial report we received, you were observed searching the air marshal's clothing, handling his belongings, and administering an injection, all without proper medical credentials." "He has first aid training," his mother interjected heatedly. "The flight crew asked for medical assistance and he volunteered. They approved everything he did." "We're aware there are conflicting accounts." Agent Reyes spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly gentle. "That's why we need to get statements from everyone involved." A knock at the door interrupted them. Agent Reyes opened it to reveal another officer, who whispered something to him before handing over a tablet. Agent Reyes scanned the screen, his eyebrows rising slightly. He passed the tablet to Agent Carter, whose expression similarly shifted as she read. "Excuse us a moment," she said, rising abruptly. Both agents stepped outside, closing the door behind them. "What do you think that was about?" Andre asked his mother, hope stirring faintly. "I don't know," she replied, squeezing his hand. But their faces changed when they saw whatever was on that tablet. "Maybe someone from the flight spoke up for you." Before Andre could respond, the door opened again. This time, a familiar face appeared. Officer Thomas himself, now in street clothes rather than his suit, though still looking pale. Behind him stood Agents Carter and Reyes, along with a distinguished-looking older man in an expensive suit. "What the hell is going on here?" Officer Thomas demanded, his gaze landing on Andre's handcuffed wrist with visible shock. "Why is this young man in custody?" "Sir, as we explained," Agent Carter began, but the older man cut her off. "Thomas, stay calm. We're sorting this out." He turned to Andre and his mother. "I'm Deputy Director Wilson with the Federal Air Marshal Service. I apologize for the situation. There appears to have been a serious miscommunication." Andre's mother stood up, her patience clearly at an end. "Miscommunication? My son is handcuffed to a table for saving this man's life, Mom," Andre said quietly, trying to keep the situation from escalating further. "It's okay. Let them explain." Deputy Director Wilson nodded gratefully at Andre before continuing. "Shortly after your flight landed, we received a report from an airline employee, not a crew member from your flight, but ground staff, who claimed to have witnessed a passenger interfering with an air marshal. This report triggered our standard security protocols." "But that's not what happened," Officer Thomas insisted, stepping closer to Andre. "This young man saved my life when I had a severe allergic reaction. Without his quick thinking and knowledge of how to use my epinephrine injector, I might not be standing here right now." "Yes, we've just received statements from the flight crew confirming this version of events," Agent Carter acknowledged, looking somewhat chagrined, "as well as multiple passenger videos that corroborate it." "So this was all because of one person's misunderstanding?" Andre's mother asked incredulously. "Unfortunately, yes," Deputy Director Wilson confirmed. "In matters involving our air marshals, we must take all reports seriously, even if they later prove to be unfounded." Agent Reyes stepped forward with a key and quickly removed the handcuff from Andre's wrist. "We apologize for the confusion and any distress this has caused." As Andre rubbed his wrist, Officer Thomas moved to he. She sighed. "I came straight from the hospital when I heard what was happening. I couldn't believe they were detaining you instead of giving you a medal." "It's okay," Andre said, though the emotional whiplash of the past hour had left him feeling drained and uncertain. "I understand they were just doing their jobs." "No, it's not okay," his mother countered firmly. "My son was handcuffed and treated like a criminal for an act of heroism. There should be consequences for this kind of mistake." Deputy Director Wilson nodded soberly. "You're absolutely right, ma'am. Rest assured we will be reviewing our protocols and addressing this incident internally. The individual who filed the false report will also be dealt with appropriately." The door opened once more, and a man in a sharp suit with a briefcase entered. "I'm looking for Andre and Linda Wilson," he announced, his gaze sweeping the room and settling on Andre and his mother. "Jerome," Andre's mother acknowledged with visible relief. "I think the situation may be resolving itself, but I'm glad you're here." As Jerome was brought up to speed, Andre found himself watching the faces around him. His mother's protective anger, Officer Thomas's indignation on his behalf, the agent's professional embarrassment, Deputy Director Wilson's diplomatic concern. Just hours ago, he'd been an ordinary teenager on an ordinary flight. Now he was at the center of what felt like a bizarre law enforcement drama. "So what happens now?" Andre finally asked, directing his question to no one in particular. Deputy Director Wilson stepped forward. "Now, young man, you are free to go, with our sincere apologies. And," he added, reaching into his pocket, "my personal card, should you ever need anything in the future." Andre accepted the card with a nod, adding it to the one Officer Thomas had given him earlier. 2 federal contacts in one day, not how he'd expected his trip to end. As they prepared to leave, Officer Thomas pulled Andre aside. "I meant what I said on the plane. You've got a real gift. Don't let today's uncomplications discourage you." "I won't," Andre promised, finding strength in the conviction that had solidified during those critical moments on the flight. "This is still what I want to do with my life." Outside the airport, with the Texas sun warm on his face and his mother's arm around his shoulders, Andre felt the tension of the past hours finally begin to dissipate. The story wasn't over. There would be forms to sign, statements to give, perhaps even media attention given how many passengers had recorded his arrest, but the worst had passed. "Your father would be so proud," his mother said softly as they walked to the parking garage. "Not just for what you did on that plane, but for how you handled yourself afterward. You stayed calm and dignified, even when they treated you unfairly." Andre nodded, too emotional to speak. The day had been a roller coaster of experiences, from the height of success in helping Officer Thomas to the depths of confusion and fear in that small interrogation room. Yet through it all, he'd held on to the certainty that he'd done the right thing, that his knowledge and quick thinking had made a difference. As they reached the car, his phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged him in a social media post. Opening it, he found a video taken by a passenger on his flight, showing the moment when he'd administered the epinephrine to Officer Thomas. The caption read, "True hero on our flight today. This kid saved an air marshal's life. A hero in row 15. Future doctor in the making." The video already had thousands of views and was climbing rapidly. "Mom," he said, showing her the screen, "I think this story might be bigger than we thought." She glanced at the video, then looked at him with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you ready for that? For people to know who you are, what you did?" Andre thought about it for a moment. The attention would be uncomfortable, certainly. He'd never sought the spotlight. But if his story inspired other young people to learn first aid, to step up when needed, to pursue careers in medicine, "I think I am," he said finally. "If it helps someone else, then it's worth it." As they drove away from the airport, Andre gazed out the window at the Dallas skyline. Today had tested him in ways he'd never expected, shown him strengths he hadn't known he possessed, and given him a glimpse of both the best and worst of human systems. But through it all, one thing had become crystal clear. This was just the beginning of his journey. 3 days had passed since Andre's arrest at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, and he still couldn't quite believe where he was sitting. The stark walls of the Juvenile Detention Center's visiting room felt surreal, as did the orange jumpsuit they'd given him to wear. His mother sat across from him, dark circles under her eyes betraying her lack of sleep. "Jerome says the hearing is tomorrow morning," she told him, her voice strained but determined. "He's confident they'll have to release you then. The judge he's dealing with is fair-minded." Andre nodded, trying to appear more hopeful than he felt. The past 72 hours had been a nightmare. Despite Officer Thomas's immediate intervention and the deputy director's apologies, bureaucracy had taken over. Someone higher up the chain, Andre never learned who, had decided that proper procedures must be followed, which apparently meant holding a minor in detention while the system ground through its slow, indifferent processes. "How are you holding up?" his mother asked, studying his face for signs of distress. "I'm okay," Andre assured her, though the truth was more complicated. He wasn't being mistreated. The staff had been professional and even kind, but the isolation and uncertainty were wearing on him. Worse was the creeping doubt that had begun to cloud his once clear vision of the future. If this was how the system treated someone trying to help, what did that mean for his dreams of becoming a doctor? "Your story is everywhere," his mother continued, her expression brightening slightly. "Every passenger from that flight seems to have posted their version online. Free Andre is trending nationally." "Really?" This was news to Andre. With no phone or internet access, he'd been cut off from the outside world's reaction. "Really? People are outraged. There have been protests outside this facility. Reporters have been calling nonstop." She reached across the table to squeeze his hand, "You're not alone in this, baby. The whole country is watching." The thought was both comforting and overwhelming. Andre had never sought attention or fame. He'd stepped up on that plane because someone needed help and he had the knowledge to provide it. Simple as that. Now his face was apparently all over the internet. His story a rallying cry for discussions about bias in law enforcement and the treatment of young black men in America. "There's something else," his mother added, her tone shifting. "Officer, Thomas held a press conference yesterday." Andre straightened in his chair. "He did? What did he say?" "He told everyone exactly what happened on that flight, how you saved his life, how shocked he was when he learned they'd arrested you." She smiled, a hint of satisfied vindication in her eyes. "He didn't pull any punches, Andre. He called it what it was, a travesty of justice based on prejudice." A small flame of hope kindled in Andre's chest. Officer Thomas was a federal agent, a respected figure in law enforcement. His public support carried weight. "The airline's executives have made statements too," his mother continued, "and the flight attendants and at least a dozen passengers. Everyone who actually witnessed what happened on that plane is speaking up for you." "Then why am I still here?" Andre couldn't keep the frustration from his voice. His mother's expression hardened. "Because systems move slowly, especially when they've made a mistake they don't want to admit. But they can't ignore this much pressure for long." As if to punctuate her words, the door to the visiting room opened. A staff member entered, accompanied by a man in a suit Andre didn't recognize. "Mrs. Wilson," the man said, addressing Andre's mother. "I'm Assistant District Attorney Powell. Could I have a moment of your time?" Andre's mother stood, her posture immediately defensive. "My son's attorney isn't present. I'm not discussing his case without Jerome here." "This isn't about discussing the case," Powell clarified quickly. "It's about resolving it immediately." 10 minutes later, Andre found himself in a small conference room, now joined by his cousin Jerome, who had arrived in record time after receiving his mother's urgent call. Assistant DA Powell sat across from them, flanked by a representative from the juvenile court. "Let me be clear," Powell began, his tone carefully measured. "After reviewing all evidence and witness statements, the district attorney's office has decided to drop all charges against Andre. This should never have gone this far, and for that, we apologize." Jerome, ever the cautious attorney, leaned forward. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Powell insisted. "We're preparing the release paperwork now. Andre should be free to go within the hour." "And the record?" Jerome pressed. "This arrest could follow him for years. The arrest record will be expunged." "Immediately," the court representative interjected. "It will be as if it never happened, legally speaking." Andre exchanged a glance with his mother, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. After 3 days of bureaucratic stonewalling, the sudden reversal seemed too good to be true. "What changed?" his mother asked bluntly. Powell shifted uncomfortably. "Several factors came into play." "The truth, please," she interrupted. After a moment's hesitation, Powell nodded. "The FBI has opened an investigation into potential civil rights violations in how this case was handled. Additionally, the White House press secretary was asked about the situation at this morning's briefing. The president is reportedly concerned and following the situation closely." Andre blinked in surprise. The president knew about him? "In other words," Jerome translated dryly, "it became politically untenable to continue holding an innocent 15-year-old hero who happens to be black." Powell didn't dispute the characterization. "The system made a mistake. We're trying to correct it as quickly as possible now." 2 hours later, dressed once more in his own clothes, Andre walked out of the detention center into the bright Texas sunshine. The scene that greeted him took his breath away. Dozens of people had gathered outside holding signs with messages like, "Justice for Andre," and "Heroes shouldn't be handcuffed." News vans lined the street, cameras tracking his emergence. His mother's arm wrapped protectively around his shoulders as reporters shouted questions. Jerome stepped in front of them, raising his hands for quiet. "My client will not be making any statements today," he announced firmly. He's a minor who has been through a traumatic experience due to systemic failures that we intend to address through appropriate legal channels. For now, we ask that you respect his privacy and allow him to reunite with his family in peace." Despite Jerome's words, Andre felt compelled to say something. These people had rallied around him, fought for him when he couldn't fight for himself. He gently moved past his cousin and approached the microphones. "I just want to say thank you," he said simply, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "To everyone who spoke up for me, who shared the truth, who believed in me. I didn't do anything special on that plane. I just used the knowledge I had to help someone who needed it. That's all any of us can do." The crowd erupted in supportive cheers as Andre returned to his mother's side. Together they made their way through the throng to Jerome's waiting car, leaving the clamor of reporters and well-wishers behind. "You okay?" his mother asked once they were safely inside the vehicle. Andre nodded, watching the detention center recede in the rear window. "Yeah, I think I am." That night, back in the comfort of his own home, Andre sat cross-legged on his bed, scrolling through his phone for the first time in days. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. His social media accounts had gained thousands of followers. Hashtags like Binder Free Andre and Hero Not Criminal had been used millions of times. News outlets from around the world had covered his story. But what caught his attention most was a video of Officer Thomas's press conference. The Air Marshal, now fully recovered from his allergic reaction, stood before a bank of microphones, his expression one of controlled fury. "Let me be absolutely clear," Officer Thomas said in the video, his voice ringing with conviction. "Andre saved my life on that flight. Without his quick thinking and medical knowledge, I might not be standing here today. The fact that he was arrested instead of honored is beyond comprehension. It speaks to persistent biases in our system that must be addressed." Andre felt a lump form in his throat as Officer Thomas continued, describing in detail how Andre had recognized the symptoms of anaphylaxis, located the epinephrine injector, and administered it with a steadiness that belied his age. "This young man has a calling," Officer Thomas concluded. "He showed more poise and skill in that emergency than many trained professionals I've worked with. Instead of handcuffing him, we should be offering him scholarships to medical school." As if the universe had been listening, Andre's phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was unfamiliar. Dr. Eleanor Chen, director of the Future Physicians Foundation. Curious, he opened it. "Dear Andre," the email began. "Like many Americans, I was moved by your recent experience, both your heroic actions aboard Flight AA1372 and the unjust treatment you received afterward. As a physician and educator, I recognized in you the qualities we desperately need in the next generation of doctors: quick thinking, technical skill, and most importantly, the courage to step forward when others step back." The Future Physicians Foundation would like to offer you a full scholarship to our intensive summer medical program for the next 3 years, as well as a guaranteed college scholarship upon graduation. We believe in nurturing talent and dedication like yours, especially when it has been tested in real-world conditions. If you're interested, please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss details. Andre read the email twice, hardly able to believe his eyes. He called for his mother, who rushed into his room, alarmed by the urgency in his voice. "What is it? What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong," he assured her, handing over his phone. "Everything's right." She read the email, her expression transforming from concern to astonishment to joy. "Oh, Andre," she breathed, pulling him into a tight embrace. "This is everything you've worked for." Over the next 6 months, Andre's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. The scholarship was just the beginning. Other offers followed: invitations to speak at medical conferences, opportunities to shadow renowned physicians, even a chance to meet with lawmakers interested in reforming protocols for airline medical emergencies. The incident that had started it all, his detention and the subsequent public outcry, sparked a national conversation about bias in law enforcement. An independent investigation revealed that the airline staff member who had filed the false report had a history of making unfounded complaints against people of color. This discovery led to broader reforms within both the airline industry and federal air marshal protocols. Officer Thomas became a regular presence in Andre's life, mentoring him and opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed. Deputy Director Wilson made good on his promise of assistance as well, helping to establish a new training program for air marshals that included recognizing and responding to medical emergencies. 6 months to the day after Flight AA-13372 had landed in Dallas, Andre found himself standing on a stage in Washington, D.C., receiving a civilian commendation for heroism from the Secretary of Homeland Security. His mother sat in the front row, tears of pride streaming down her face as he accepted the medal. "This recognition isn't just for me," Andre said in his brief acceptance speech. "It's for everyone who believes that doing the right thing matters, even when systems fail us. It's for everyone who spoke up when I couldn't speak for myself. And it's for my father, who taught me that helping others is never the wrong choice, no matter what comes after." The applause was thunderous, but to Andre, the most meaningful response came later, at the reception following the ceremony. A young girl, perhaps 12 years old, approached him shyly, clutching a book about first aid. "I started taking classes because of you," she told him, her voice barely audible above the buzz of conversation around them. "I want to be a doctor too." Andre smiled, recognizing in her the same spark, the same calling that had guided him onto that fateful flight. "What's your name?" he asked. "Zoe," she replied. "Well, Zoe," he said, kneeling to meet her at eye level, "the world needs more doctors who care. Keep learning, keep helping people, and don't let anything stop you." She nodded solemnly, as if receiving a sacred mission, then hurried back to her parents, the first aid book clutched tightly to her chest. Later that night, in the quiet of his hotel room, Andre stood by the window, gazing out at the monuments and buildings of the capital city glowing in the darkness. 6 months ago, he'd been a normal teenager with a dream. Then came a flight that changed everything. The emergency, the arrest, the public outcry, and finally this unexpected recognition. The journey had not been easy. There had been nightmares about the detention center, anxiety attacks before public appearances, moments of doubt about whether the system could ever truly change. But there had also been growth, opportunity, and a deepening conviction that his path in medicine was the right one. His phone buzzed with a text from Officer Thomas. "Proud of you today, kid. Remember this feeling. It's what keeps us going when things get tough." Andre smiled and typed back a quick thanks. As he set the phone down, his gaze fell on the medal he'd received earlier, resting on the desk beside his latest medical textbook. The contrast struck him as fitting somehow, recognition for the past alongside preparation for the future. In the morning, he would return to Dallas, to his school and his health sciences program, to the familiar routine of classes and homework and training. But he would carry with him the lessons of these past 6 months, that systems can fail but people can rise up, that one voice can spark change, that knowledge applied at the right moment can save a life, and most importantly, that justice, though sometimes slow and stumbling, can eventually prevail.